Michael Jackson, the dark truth they never told you, from genius to breaking point. He was the most recognizable face on Earth, one of the most searched celebrities in modern history. Michael Jackson didn't just dominate music. At the height of his fame, journalists compared his global recognition to religious figures, an exaggeration that still captured how inescapable his presence had become. But behind the moonwalk and the magic, something was breaking. Most people know the legend, the glittering glove, the revolutionary dance moves, the voice that could shatter hearts. What they don't know is the cost. By age 10, Michael Jackson had already lost something most of us take for granted: his childhood, his sense of safety, and his ability to exist as anything other than a performance. This is the story of a genius shaped by pressure so intense it would eventually crack him. From a 6-year-old boy rehearsing until his feet bled, to a global icon who felt safer on stage than anywhere else in the world, the untold story of Michael Jackson isn't just about fame. It's about what fame takes when it arrives too early and demands too much. Before Michael became the king of pop, he was a skinny kid from Gary, Indiana, with a voice that could stop traffic. At 6 years old, he joined his older brothers in a group orchestrated by their father, Joe. And Joe didn't believe in half measures. Rehearsals weren't optional, they were survival training. The Jackson boys practiced for hours, every single day. Vocals, choreography, timing. Perfection wasn't the goal, it was the baseline. Joe Jackson ran those sessions like a drill sergeant, critiquing every move, every note, every breath. And when someone messed up, there were consequences. Michael later spoke about it plainly. Mistakes could mean getting hit, sometimes with a belt, sometimes with a switch. Think about that for a second. Most kids at 6 are learning to ride bikes and playing tag. Michael was learning that his value depended entirely on his performance. Joe once told his sons, "If you guys ever stop singing, I'll drop you like a hot potato." That wasn't a joke. It was a warning Michael carried for the rest of his life. What's often overlooked is how this upbringing shaped Michael's relationship with love itself. In interviews decades later, he would describe feeling like he didn't know what a normal childhood looked like. He talked about pressing his face against the window of the tour bus, watching other children play in parks, and crying because he couldn't join them. The other Jackson brothers had each other and were older. They could contextualize what was happening. But Michael, the youngest performer, was the most exposed. He was the front man. He bore the most pressure, and he had the least ability to process it. By 9 or 10, Motown signed the Jackson 5. Suddenly, Michael wasn't just a kid with potential. He was a product, profitable before he even hit puberty. Years later, when asked if he felt like a commodity for his father, Michael answered without hesitation, "Yes, absolutely." But here's what makes Michael's story different from so many other child stars. He didn't just survive the pressure, he absorbed it and turned it into something extraordinary. People who studied his work described him as intensely observant, frighteningly quick to learn, and unusually sensitive to rhythm and emotion. He didn't have formal training in music theory, yet his instincts were off the charts. Michael read voraciously. Thousands of books reportedly filled his personal library. He studied Fred Astaire's Grace, James Brown's Electricity, Charlie Chaplin's storytelling. He didn't copy his heroes. He dissected them, pulled out what resonated, and stitched it into something that sounded and moved like no one else. That's not just talent. That's genius under construction. He would spend hours in front of mirrors, not out of vanity, but to perfect a single arm movement or the timing of a head turn. He recorded himself constantly, playing back performances to find even the slightest imperfection. Crew members later recalled that he could hear a single instrument out of tune in a full orchestra recording. His ear was supernatural. His discipline was obsessive, and both of those qualities were born from a childhood where anything less than perfect had real consequences. By his teenage years, Michael could choreograph, write, produce, and perform at levels most professionals never reach. He wasn't just multi-talented, he was relentlessly driven to master everything he touched. And that work ethic didn't come from nowhere. It was forged in those childhood rehearsals where mistakes came with fear and pain. The Jackson 5 became a phenomenon, but Michael's solo career would eclipse everything. Off the Wall proved he could stand alone. Then came Thriller, November 1982, produced by Quincy Jones, reportedly with a budget around $750,000. The album didn't just succeed, it rewrote the rules. Thriller became the first album to produce 7 Billboard Hot 100 Top 10 singles. It won 8 Grammy Awards in one night. Often cited as the best-selling album of all time, estimates commonly place worldwide sales above 70 million copies. Let that number settle for a moment. 70 million. In an era without streaming, without social media, without the internet. That's pure, undeniable cultural domination. But the numbers don't tell the real story. What Thriller did was bigger than sales. It shifted culture. By the early 1980s, major pop platforms, especially MTV, were still slow to fully embrace black artists. Michael didn't just knock on that door, he forced it open. CBS Records reportedly pressured MTV to play Billie Jean, and once they did, the floodgates opened. Michael didn't just break a barrier, he demolished it, and an entire generation of black artists walked through the opening he created. MTV placed his videos into heavy rotation due to unprecedented demand. The 14-minute Thriller short film, directed by John Landis, transformed music videos from promotional clips into cinematic events. It helped change what stardom looked like and who could own it. The landscape shifted. And Michael didn't stop there. The Bad album in 1987 produced 5 consecutive #1 singles, a record at the time. The accompanying world tour became the highest-grossing concert tour in history up to that point. Then came Dangerous in 1991, which pushed his artistry even further, blending pop with New Jack Swing and more socially conscious themes. The Black or White video premiered simultaneously in 27 countries to an estimated audience of 500 million viewers. Every album wasn't just a release, it was a global event, and each one pushed the boundaries of what a pop artist could be. March 25th, 1983, Motown 25, Yesterday, Today, Forever. Michael stepped onto that stage wearing black trousers, silver socks, a black sequined jacket, and a single rhinestone glove. The performance lasted minutes. The impact lasted forever. He spun, he posed, then he did something nobody had seen before. He glided backward as if gravity had rewritten its rules just for him. The Moonwalk. And afterward, even then, he reportedly downplayed it because that's what perfectionists shaped by pressure tend to do. Even when they blow the world's mind, they see only the flaws. Fred Astaire reportedly called Michael the next day to congratulate him. Think about the weight of that. One of the greatest dancers in history recognizing a new king. That move became his signature. And later, he didn't just perform the impossible, he helped engineer it. For the smooth criminal, Lean, a patent was filed for a special shoe mechanism that could anchor performers to the stage, letting them tilt forward at an unnatural angle. It wasn't just illusion, it was design, it was invention. Michael wasn't content to simply perform magic, he wanted to build the machinery behind it. By the mid-1980s, Michael Jackson had become a level of famous that's hard to describe without sounding unreal. Guinness World Records documented his extraordinary commercial success and reach, but fame at that level isn't a reward, it's a prison, one where the guards are the people who adore you. He couldn't walk down a street, he couldn't eat at a restaurant, he couldn't exist in public without causing a scene that bordered on dangerous. Fans fainted at the sight of him. Crowds surged. Bodyguards became a permanent extension of his body. The simple human experience of anonymity, something most people never think about, was permanently stolen from him. Off stage, he withdrew. On stage, he worked until exhaustion, because the stage was the one place anxiety could be translated into control. Think about the tragedy of that. The only place Michael Jackson felt free was in front of millions of strangers. The only place he felt safe was performing for the very machine that was consuming him. What many people don't realize is that alongside his personal struggles, Michael was one of the most generous entertainers in history. He supported dozens of charities throughout his career. Guinness World Records recognized him as the pop star who supported the most charitable organizations. He donated millions to causes ranging from children's hospitals to disaster relief. We Are the World, the 1985 charity single he co-wrote with Lionel Richie, raised over $63 million for famine relief in Africa. His 1993 Super Bowl halftime performance, the one that essentially invented the modern Super Bowl halftime show, was followed by a donation of his entire performance fee to charity. Behind the spectacle was a man who genuinely wanted to help people, but the world was far more interested in his eccentricities than his generosity. And then there was his business genius, something rarely discussed. In 1985, Michael purchased the ATV music catalog, which contained the publishing rights to a vast collection of songs, including much of the Beatles catalog. It was a bold, savvy move that stunned the music industry. That catalog would become one of the most valuable music assets in the world, eventually merging with Sony's catalog to form Sony/ATV. It was proof that Michael wasn't just a performer. He was a strategist, a businessman who understood the long-term value of intellectual property in ways that many of his peers didn't. By the late 80s, his offstage life attracted as much attention as his performances. The surgeries, the changing appearance, the tabloid feeding frenzy. People mocked him. Headlines turned him into a caricature. But nobody asked the right question. What happens to someone who never got to be a person before becoming a phenomenon? Psychological research shows that adverse childhood experiences can increase long-term risk for anxiety, depression, and other mental health struggles. Michael described rigid discipline, emotional coldness, and physical punishment. Prolonged exposure to control and fear can create chronic hypervigilance, difficulty trusting others, and a relentless need to perform for safety. His obsession with perfection, that can be a survival strategy. His people-pleasing, another survival strategy. And some clinicians have noted that repeated cosmetic procedures can sometimes align with body image distress, especially when combined with anxiety and childhood trauma. The key point isn't diagnosing him from afar, it's recognizing the pattern. A man trying to control what he could because so much of his life began without control. His appearance also intersected with race and identity in ways the public often reduced to jokes. Michael publicly stated he had vitiligo, and he also spoke about the pressures of being scrutinized visually, constantly, by a world that never stopped watching. The skin condition, confirmed in his autopsy, was a medical reality the media largely dismissed during his lifetime, choosing mockery over understanding. Michael didn't hide that he struggled. He spoke about loneliness, stress, and trauma, but understanding didn't come with compassion. It came with more scrutiny. Many psychologists interpret his creation of Neverland as a form of reclamation, a controlled world where he could chase pieces of the childhood he never had. Critics called it bizarre. Others saw something painfully human, someone trying to heal wounds nobody else could see. The ranch had an amusement park, a zoo, a movie theater, all things a child would dream of, and Michael filled it with children's laughter because that was the sound his own childhood never had enough of. But Neverland also became a lightning rod for controversy. The allegations that followed would define public perception of Michael for decades. Regardless of the legal outcomes, acquittals and settlements alike, the court of public opinion was merciless. And for a man whose entire identity was built on being loved by the world, that shift was devastating. By the late 90s and early 2000s, Michael had become a paradox, still capable of brilliance, still revolutionary in his artistry, but increasingly isolated and surrounded by people who rarely said no. The man who once forced doors open now lived behind doors that rarely opened at all. His circle shrank, his trust eroded, and the people who remained closest weren't always the people who had his best interests at heart. He moved between countries, living in Bahrain, Ireland, and eventually settling back near Los Angeles. Reports described him as a wandering figure, still creative, still dreaming of new projects, but increasingly disconnected from the industry that had built him. He talked about opening a children's hospital. He talked about making movies. He talked about everything except the thing the world wanted him to do, perform. Because performing had become synonymous with pain, and yet it was the only language the world wanted to hear from him. Then came 2009. This is it. 50 shows at London's O2 Arena, a comeback, and a chance to remind the world why he mattered. At the press conference, he arrived late and appeared fragile. Later, reporting and internal messages suggested serious concern behind the scenes about his health, his fear, and his readiness. The financial pressure behind the comeback was enormous. Michael reportedly owed hundreds of millions in debt. The This Is It shows were not just about artistic redemption, they were about financial survival. AEG Live, the concert promoter, had invested heavily, and the stakes were staggering. Michael was essentially performing under the weight of contractual obligations that left little room for the fragility of a man who hadn't toured in over a decade. The pressure wasn't just emotional, it was existential. If the shows failed, everything could collapse. Rehearsals began. Some noticed he missed sessions, some described him as slow to absorb choreography. Others said flashes of the old Michael still appeared, sharp, musical, precise, then vanished again. Accounts from people around him described mood swings, anxiety, and long stretches of exhaustion. The legendary performer was clearly under extreme strain, yet nobody stopped the machine. The show must go on. Michael believed that more than anyone, and some close to him later said he carried a deep fear that if he couldn't perform, something terrible would happen. Not metaphorically, but physically. In the final weeks, Michael wasn't sleeping. Chronic insomnia had plagued him for years, worsened by anxiety and physical pain from decades of performing. He'd suffered a severe scalp burn during a Pepsi commercial in 1984. An account suggests he struggled with pain afterward. Enter Dr. Conrad Murray, a cardiologist hired as his personal physician for a reported $150,000 a month. His job was to help Michael sleep. The method became propofol, a powerful surgical anesthetic never intended for home use. Murray administered it in Michael's bedroom, turning the space into a makeshift medical setting, a practice widely condemned by medical professionals. Propofol requires proper monitoring and equipment. Michael reportedly called it milk, saying it was the only thing that let him rest. But propofol doesn't produce natural sleep, it produces unconsciousness. The body doesn't restore the same way. Night after night, the world's most famous performer was chemically shutting himself down just to escape being awake. June 24, 2009. Rehearsals intensified. People around Michael noted he complained of being cold, even under stage lights. His weight appeared dangerously low. He looked frail, shaking, but still trying to dance, still trying to be Michael Jackson. That night, he returned to the rented home in Holmby Hills. He asked Murray for the milk. Murray administered propofol around 10:40 p.m. What happened next was argued in court, analyzed in reports, and swallowed by years of speculation. But the facts remain. In the early hours of June 25th, Michael Jackson stopped breathing. Murray claimed he stepped away briefly. When he returned, Michael had no pulse. Instead of calling 911 immediately, he attempted resuscitation. Minutes passed. By the time paramedics arrived, it was already sliding out of reach. At 2:26 p.m., Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at UCLA Medical Center. Cause of death: acute propofol intoxication. The death was officially ruled a homicide. Conrad Murray was convicted of involuntary manslaughter in 2011 and served a prison sentence. The world stopped. News broke during the BET Awards. Celebrities wept on camera, fans flooded hospitals and city centers. Radio stations pivoted into non-stop Michael Jackson. The internet strained under the surge. Even Google later acknowledged the search spike was so extreme it initially resembled an attack. Phone networks jammed, websites crashed. It was as if the entire digital infrastructure of the planet buckled under the collective grief of billions. His death wasn't just news, it was a global event. And the hardest truth was this: the man who brought millions together spent his final days isolated, surrounded by employees, handlers, and pressure. A legacy left tangled in grief, lawsuits, and unanswered questions. His 3 children, Prince, Paris, and Blanket, were left to navigate a world without the father who had tried, in his own complicated way, to shield them from the very spotlight that defined his existence. The custody battles, the estate disputes, and the ongoing public fascination with his life would continue for years. Even in death, Michael Jackson couldn't escape the machinery of fame. The world that had consumed him alive continued to consume his memory, debating his legacy with the same intensity it had once debated his life. Yet even in death, Michael's influence didn't fade, it intensified. This Is It was released, showing rehearsal footage from those final weeks. Flashes of brilliance, glimpses of the visionary still inside him. The film grossed hundreds of millions worldwide. His estate, once buried in financial trouble, became one of the highest-earning estates in entertainment. His music continued to sell, stream, and inspire. Cultural institutions continued to study him, not only as an artist, but as a symbol of modern celebrity itself. Artists from Beyoncé to Bruno Mars to The Weeknd have cited Michael as a foundational influence. His choreography DNA lives in every pop performance you see today. The concept of the music video as an art form, that was Michael. The idea that a pop concert should be a theatrical experience, Michael. The notion that a single artist could transcend language, race, and geography to become truly universal, Michael proved it was possible before anyone else even tried. His memorial service at the Staples Center in Los Angeles drew an estimated 31 million American viewers. Worldwide, the numbers were in the billions. It was a funeral that felt like a global holiday of mourning. Streets went quiet, strangers cried together, and the weight of what had been lost settled over the entire world like a fog that wouldn't lift. But the tragedy isn't only that he died, it's how he lived. A boy robbed of childhood, a man trapped inside a myth that the world helped build, someone who gave everything to the public and received applause, but never peace. The genius was real, the music immortal, the impact undeniable, but the man behind it all never got the one thing he needed most: permission to be human. Michael Jackson showed us what happens when talent meets impossible pressure from the beginning, when childhood becomes rehearsal and love becomes conditional on performance. He gave the world moments that united millions. But nobody gave him back what was taken, the ability to exist without the weight of being Michael Jackson. His story isn't about warning people away from fame. It's about remembering that behind every icon is someone who bleeds when cut, who breaks under enough weight, who needs the same basic things we all do: safety, rest, and connection that isn't transactional. And maybe that's the lesson Michael's life teaches us more than any of his songs ever could. The cost of genius, when left unprotected, is the genius itself. The boy from Gary became a global legend, but fame didn't save him. It consumed him, and we all watched it happen, cheering for the performance while the performer suffocated behind the curtain. That's what should make you go, Not just his death, but what we demand from our legends while they're still alive. If this made you see Michael differently, hit like and tell me what surprised you most. Subscribe to The Unseen Celebrity, because the truth behind the headlines is always more complex than we think. Michael's legacy lives on in every artist who dares to be bigger than the moment. But his life ended in a bedroom with a drug meant for operating rooms, and a comeback that should have never required him to risk everything just to be believed again. The king never found a kingdom. He just kept performing until the lights went out.